The stars looked different from the observation deck of the Terra Nova ambassador. Hyenwu Park had seen them countless times during his 20-year career, but today they seemed colder somehow. He pressed his palm against the reinforced glass and watched the distant lights twinkle in the void. In a few hours, everything would change. "Sir, they are ready for you," his aide whispered from behind him. The young woman's voice carried barely above a breath, as if speaking too loudly might shatter something fragile in the air. Hyenwu straightened his formal diplomatic robes and nodded. The weight of representing all of humanity had never felt heavier than it did in this moment. He had negotiated trade agreements with 12 different species. He had prevented 3 separate conflicts between Earth colonies and alien settlements. But nothing in his extensive experience had prepared him for today. The council chamber aboard the station was massive beyond human comprehension. The ceiling stretched so high that shadows gathered in its peaks like storm clouds. Representatives from 47 different species sat in towering seats arranged in concentric circles around a small platform in the center. Their eyes, tentacles, optical sensors, and other sensory organs all focused on the lone human figure walking toward the speaking platform. Hyenwu had met many of these beings before during preliminary negotiations. The insectoid hegemony delegates with their clicking mandibles, gaseous ethereals who communicated through color changes in their containment suits, the plant-like rooted ones who required mobile soil containers to attend meetings. Each species was unique, ancient, and powerful, in ways humanity was only beginning to understand. At the head of the chamber sat High Counselor Vitarin of the Core Worlds, the oldest and most influential member of the Galactic Council species. Had been traveling between stars when humans were still learning to make fire. His purple-tinted skin seemed to glow with an inner light, and his 4 eyes regarded Hyenwu with what might have been disappointment. Ambassador Park of the human species. Vitarina's voice resonated through translation devices embedded in the chamber walls. "You have come to hear our decision regarding your people's application for membership in the Galactic Council." "Yes," High Counselor Hyenwu replied, his voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. "Humanity eagerly awaits your wisdom." A low rumble of what might have been laughter rippled through the assembled delegates. Hyenwu felt his stomach sink. He had hoped for a positive reception, but the atmosphere in the chamber felt hostile, almost predatory. "Your species has been observed for 57 of your years," Vitarin continued. "We have studied your history, your biology, your psychology, and your social structures. We have watched your expansion into space and your interactions with other developing species." The High Counselor paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the chamber. Hyenwu knew that humanity's expansion had not always been peaceful. There had been conflicts with mining corporations over asteroid rights, tensions with the Centauri settlements over territorial boundaries, a few unfortunate incidents involving human military responses that other species considered excessive. "Council has reached a unanimous decision," Vitarin announced. "Humanity is too dangerous and unpredictable to be granted membership in the Galactic Council." The words hit Hyenwu like a physical blow. It prepared arguments for partial membership, for probationary status, even for delayed consideration. But outright rejection had seemed impossible after months of productive negotiations. "High Counselor," he began, but Vatiron raised one of his 4 hands to silence him. "Your species demonstrates an alarming tendency toward violence when faced with challenges," the alien leader continued. "Your history shows repeated cycles of warfare, destruction, and conquest. Even your expansion into space has been marked by aggressive territorial claims and resource competition." Delegate Korthvel of the hegemony leaned forward in his towering seat. His chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber's lights as he spoke. "Humans fight when they could negotiate. They destroy when they could build. They take what they believe they need without consideration for others." "That is not entirely accurate," Hyenwu protested, finding his diplomatic voice. "Humanity has also shown remarkable capacity for cooperation, creativity, and peaceful problem-solving. Our art, our science, our philosophy are overshadowed by your military history," interrupted Counselor Ythmara of the Deep Swimmers. Her aquatic species required a water-filled environment suit. and her translated voice carried the musical quality of whale songs. You have weapons capable of destroying entire planets. You have used them against your own species. The chamber fell silent except for the ambient hum of life support systems. Hyen-Woo felt the weight of human history pressing down on him. Every war, every conflict, every moment of violence his species had ever committed seemed to echo in that silence. However, Vaderin said after a long moment, "The Council recognizes that final judgment should not rest on observation alone. We offer your species one final opportunity to prove your worthiness." Hope flared in Hyen-Woo's chest. "Trial by combat," Korthfell answered, his mandibles clicking with what might have been anticipation. "An ancient tradition among civilized species. One representative of humanity will face our chosen champion in single combat. No weapons beyond natural ability, no assistance from others. Fight until one cannot continue." The chamber erupted in a symphony of alien sounds. Clicks, whistles, harmonious tones, and mechanical buzzes filled the air as the delegates expressed their approval of this decision. "Combat will be broadcast across the galaxy," Vaderon explained. "All species will witness either humanity's courage or humanity's defeat. If your champion wins, your species will be granted full membership in the Council. If your champion falls, humanity will be permanently barred from galactic civilization." "And if we refuse?" Hyen-Woo asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then you will be classified as a hostile species," Ythmora replied. "No trade agreements, no diplomatic relations, no protection under galactic law. Eventually, your territories will be claimed by expanding civilizations, and your species will become extinct." The ultimatum was clear: fight and possibly win everything, or refuse and definitely lose everything. There was no third option, no room for negotiation, no diplomatic solution. "You have 7 of your days to select a champion and arrive at the neutral station Nexus Prime," Vataran announced. "Our champion awaits. Choose wisely, Ambassador Park. Your species' future depends on it." As the council session ended and the delegates began filing out of the chamber, Hyen-Woo remained standing on the small platform. The weight of his failure pressed down on him like a physical force. He had come here to secure humanity's place among the stars through words and wisdom. Instead, he would return home with news that their survival depended on a single person's ability to fight an alien warrior. The stars outside the Terra Nova still looked cold as Hyen-Woo prepared his message to Earth, but now they seemed hostile. Two, filled with civilizations that had judged humanity and found them wanting. Everything his species had worked toward, everything they had hoped to achieve among the stars, now rested on finding someone willing to fight for their future. The message was simple. Humanity needed a champion, and they had 6 days to find one. The emergency session at Earth's Lunar Military Academy began at 0400 hours. General Tajin Choi stood at the head of the long metal table, his weathered face grave as he looked at the assembled officers. The holographic display behind him showed Ambassador Park's recorded message, which had arrived just 6 hours earlier. "Ladies and gentlemen, humanity has 5 days to select a champion," General Choi said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. "The Galactic Council has made their position clear. We fight or we face extinction." Captain So-Young Lee shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She commanded the Academy's most elite training unit and had seen countless young soldiers come through her program. The idea of sending any of them to face an alien warrior seemed impossible. "Sir, what do we know about their champion?" asked Colonel Jin Ho-Nam from the Intelligence Division. "Very little," General Choi admitted. "The Council's message mentioned that their warrior has never been defeated. 12 other species have attempted this trial. All failed." The room fell. Quiet again. Everyone understood what that meant. 12 other species had sent their best fighters, their strongest warriors, their most skilled combatants. All had died trying to earn a place in galactic civilization. "We need options," General Choi continued. "Enhanced soldiers from the Mars colonies, cybernetic warriors from the belt stations, maybe even volunteers from the gene modification programs." Jun Han, The Academy's chief psychologist raised her hand. General, with respect, I think we're approaching this wrong. The council called us too violent, too aggressive. Maybe sending our most enhanced killer isn't the message we want to broadcast to the galaxy. The message doesn't matter if we're all dead. Colonel Name replied sharply. Outside the conference room, Cadet Minho Kim pressed his ear against the door. He wasn't supposed to be there. His quarters were 2 levels down, in morning formation. Wouldn't begin for another hour. But like every other person on Luna, he had heard about the ambassador's return and the emergency meetings that followed. Min-Ho was 22 years old and unremarkable in most ways. Average height for a human male at 5 feet 9 inches. Average build at 170 pounds. His test scores were good but not exceptional. His physical fitness ratings were solid but not outstanding. In a military academy full of future heroes and leaders, he was the kind of person who blended into the background. But Minho had one quality that set him apart from his classmates. He had joined the military for reasons that had nothing to do with glory or adventure. 3 years earlier, his family had died in a mining accident on Ceres. His parents and younger sister had been working the asteroid belt, part of the dangerous but profitable business of extracting rare metals from space rocks. A structural failure in the mining station had killed 47 people in 30 seconds. Minho had been on Earth at the time, finishing his final year of civilian education. He could have stayed there, found a safe job, lived a quiet life. Instead, he had enlisted in the Space Marines. Not because he wanted to fight, but because he wanted to serve. The military gave him purpose when everything else had been taken away. Now, listening to the officers debate who should represent humanity, Minho felt something stirring in his chest. It wasn't excitement or ambition. It was duty. The conference. Room door opened suddenly, and Minho stumbled backward as Captain Lee emerged. She stopped short when she saw him. Cadet Kim, what are you doing here? I volunteer, ma'am, Minho said before she could scold him for eavesdropping. Captain Lee blinked in surprise. Excuse me? For the trial combat, ma'am? I volunteer to be humanity's champion. Behind Captain Lee, the conversation in the conference room had stopped. General Choi appeared in the doorway, his expression stern. Cadet, you were listening to classified discussions, the general said. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, sir. But I volunteer anyway. General Choi studied the young man for a long moment. Why? Minho stood straighter, falling into proper attention. The council says we're too violent. They think we're killers and conquerors. Maybe they're right about some of us. But not all of us. If humanity is being judged, they should judge what we really are, not just our best weapons. And what are we really, Cadet? Dr. Han asked, stepping forward with interest. We're people who keep going when things get bad, ma'am. We're people who help each other when everything falls apart. We're people who find ways to survive when survival seems impossible. The officers exchanged glances. General Choi frowned. Cadet Kim, this isn't a survival exercise. This is combat to the death against an alien warrior who has killed representatives from 12 other species. Your idealism won't protect you from claws and fangs. Maybe not, sir. But maybe that's not what the galaxy needs to see. Captain Lee stepped closer to Minho. She had trained him for 2 years and knew his record well. Kim, you're not our strongest fighter. You're not our fastest runner. Your marksmanship scores are barely above average. Yes, ma'am. I know. Then why do you think you can succeed where enhanced warriors and cybernetic soldiers might fail? I was quiet for a moment, thinking about his family on Ceres, about the 47 people who had died when the mining station failed, about how the survivors had kept working anyway because the work needed to be done. Because I'm not trying to be better than them, ma'am. I'm just trying to be human. Dr. Han whispered something to General Choi, who nodded slowly. The psychologist had been studying human performance under extreme stress for 20 years. Had seen soldiers break under pressure and others find strength they never knew they had. General, she said loud enough for everyone to hear, I'd like to run some tests on Cadet Kim. What kind of tests? Colonel Nam asked skeptically. Psychological. Resilience. Stress response. Adaptability under changing conditions. The kind of qualities that might matter more than pure physical strength in an unknown combat situation. General Choi looked at Minho again. The young man stood quietly at attention, not arguing his case or trying to convince anyone. He had made his offer and was waiting for their decision. Very well, the general said finally. Dr. Han, you have 48 hours to evaluate Cadet Kim. If he passes your tests, we'll consider his application. As the group dispersed, Captain Lee caught Minho's arm. Kim, do you understand what you're volunteering for? This isn't a training exercise. You could die. Minho nodded. Yes, ma'am. Understand, then why? He thought about his answer for a moment. My family died because something broke and couldn't be fixed in time. If humanity breaks now, there won't be anyone left to fix it. Someone has to try. Captain Lee released his arm and watched him walk away. She had trained hundreds of soldiers. She had never met one quite like Minho Kim. He wasn't the strongest or the fastest or the smartest, but there was something about him that reminded her why she had joined the military in the first place. In her experience, the best soldiers weren't always the ones who looked like heroes. Sometimes they were just the ones who showed up when showing up mattered most. And now, with humanity's future hanging in the balance, showing up might be the most important quality of all. The transport ship carrying Minho Kim docked at Nexus Prime exactly 72 hours after his selection. The neutral station hung in empty space between 3 star systems, a massive construct of metal and crystal that served as the galaxy's most important meeting place. It was here that trade agreements were signed, territorial disputes were settled, and now, where humanity's fate would be decided. Minho pressed his face against the small porthole as the station grew larger. He had seen pictures of alien architecture before, but nothing had prepared him for the reality. The station seemed to breathe, its surfaces shifting between different colors, as internal lights pulsed in patterns he couldn't understand. Docking. Bays opened and closed like mouths, welcoming ships from dozens of different species. First time seeing a council station? Asked Captain So-Young Lee, who had insisted on accompanying him despite orders to stay on Luna. Yes, ma'am, Minho replied. It's bigger than I imagined. Everything about this is bigger than we imagined, she said quietly. The docking process took 20 minutes. When the airlock finally opened, they were greeted by a figure that made Minho's breath catch in his throat. The being stood nearly 7 feet tall, with pale blue skin and 6 arms arranged in pairs down its torso. Its head was elongated, with large black eyes that seemed to see everything at once. I am Coordinator Zethelin, the alien said through a translation device attached to its throat. I will escort you to your quarters and explain the combat protocols. They followed the coordinator through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The walls displayed moving images of different worlds, their surfaces rippling like water when touched by the alien's multiple hands. Other beings moved through the hallways, some walking on legs, others floating in personal atmosphere suits. A few moving along the walls like giant insects. The combat arena is located in Section 7, Zethelin explained as they walked. It is a sealed environment containing multiple terrain types: desert, forest, rocky terrain, and water features. The combat will continue until one participant cannot continue fighting. What are the rules exactly? Captain Lee asked. No external assistance. No protective gear beyond basic clothing. The combat is monitored, but not interrupted. Zethelin paused at a large window that looked out into space. The entire galaxy will be watching. Over 40 billion beings have already registered to view the broadcast. Minho felt his stomach tighten. 40 billion viewers waiting to see him fail. 40 billion beings who expected humanity to fall just like the 12 species before them. When do I meet the champion? He asked. Tomorrow, before the combat begins. Standard protocol allows both participants to see each other first. Zethelin asked. Black eyes focused on Minho. Are you certain you wish to proceed? Your species still has time to select a different representative, certain Minho said, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice. Their quarters were simple, but comfortable, with furniture that adjusted to human proportions. Captain Lee spent the evening reviewing intelligence reports about previous trial combats. while Minho sat quietly and tried to prepare his mind for what was coming. The next morning, Zethlin led them to an observation room overlooking the arena. The space was enormous, at least 200 meters in diameter and 50 meters high. Different sections contained sand dunes, thick forest, jagged rocks, and a large pool of water. Cameras floated silently through the air, recording everything. "For the Galactic broadcast, your opponent," Zethlin announced. The champion emerged from a tunnel on the far side of the arena. Minho felt his heart skip a beat. The creature stood 8 feet tall, with a body that seemed designed for killing. Its skin was dark gray and looked as hard as armor plating. 4 arms ended in hands with claws as long as kitchen knives. Its head was massive, with a mouth full of teeth that could bite through steel. "Krathtok of the Hegemony," Zethlin said. "He has represented the Council in trial combat for 47 years. No opponent has ever forced him to use all 4 arms in battle." The champion moved through the arena with fluid grace, testing the different terrains. When he reached the rocky section, he casually punched a boulder. The stone shattered into pieces. Captain Lee grabbed Minho's arm. "Kim, this is insane. That thing could tear you apart with one hand." Minho watched Krathtok continue his inspection of the arena. The alien champion moved like a predator, confident and deadly. But Minho noticed something else. The creature was showing off, demonstrating his strength for the cameras. He wanted the galaxy to see his power before the fight even began. "He's trying to scare me," Minho said quietly. "Is it working?" Captain Lee asked. Min-Ho thought about it honestly. Yes, he was scared. Terrified, actually. But fear wasn't the only thing he was feeling. There was something else. Something that had been growing in his chest since he first volunteered. "Yes, ma'am, I'm scared. But I'm also curious. Curious about what? About how long I can last. About what I can do when everything seems impossible." Minho turned away from the window. "My family died when their mining station broke. They couldn't fix it in time, but they tried right up until the end. The survivors said my father was still working on the life support systems when the station collapsed." Captain Lee studied his face. "And you think that matters against something like that?" "I think it's the only thing that matters." Later that afternoon, Minho was brought to a preparation room adjacent to the arena. Through the walls, he could hear the sound of the gathering crowd. Beings from across the galaxy had come to witness humanity's trial, and their voices created a constant buzz of excitement and anticipation. A medical technician attached monitoring devices to his body, explaining that they would track his vital Tausnesla signs for the broadcast. Another technician fitted him with a simple gray uniform, the only clothing allowed in the arena. "The combat begins in 1 hour," Zethlin informed him. "Do you have any final questions?" Minho shook his head. He had spent the last day thinking about everything he wanted to say, everything he wanted the galaxy to know about humanity. But now, facing the reality of the combat, words seemed inadequate. "I have a message I'd like broadcast before the fight begins," he said finally. "What message?" Minho looked toward the arena where Krathtok was waiting. "Tell them that humanity appreciates this opportunity. Tell them we understand the honor of being judged by the Council. And tell them that whatever happens, we're grateful for the chance to show who we really are." Zethlin's expression was unreadable. "That is all?" "That's all." As the hour passed, Minho sat quietly in his preparation room. He could hear the crowd growing larger, the excitement building. Somewhere in that crowd were representatives from species that had tried this same trial and failed. Somewhere among the viewers were beings who had already written humanity off as another violent species destined for extinction. But Minho wasn't thinking about them. He was thinking about his family on Ceres, about Captain Lee's training, about all the people on Earth and Luna and Mars who were counting on him. He wasn't the strongest human or the fastest or the smartest, but he was here, and he was ready to show the galaxy what humans could do when everything depended on not giving up. The door to the arena opened, and Minho Kim walked forward to meet his destiny. The arena fell silent as Minho Kim stepped onto the sandy floor. Above him, thousands of alien spectators filled the viewing galleries. their various forms of communication creating a low hum of anticipation. Floating cameras move through the air like mechanical birds. It's broadcasting every moment to billions of viewers across the galaxy. Krathtok stood at the opposite end of the arena, his forearms hanging loose at his sides. The alien champion's dark gray skin seemed to absorb light, making him look like a living shadow against the artificial landscape. His massive head turned toward Minho, and even from 50 meters away, the human could see the predator's confidence in those black eyes. Combat begins in 30 seconds, announced Coordinator Zethalin's voice through hidden speakers. Remember, no weapons, no assistance. Fight until one cannot continue. Minho took a deep breath and looked around the arena one final time. To his left was a section of thick forest with trees that reached toward the dome ceiling. To his right lay rocky terrain filled with boulders and steep cliffs. Behind him stretched a desert area with rolling sand dunes. And ahead, past Krathtok, was a large pool of water surrounded by muddy ground. The human was smaller than many of the alien spectators had expected. He looked fragile standing in the vast arena, like a child who had wandered into a place meant for giants. Several species in the crowd made sounds that their translators converted into laughter. 10 seconds, Zethalin announced. Krathtok raised all four arms and let out a roar that echoed throughout the arena. The sound was meant to terrify, to paralyze his opponent with fear before the battle even began. It had worked on 11 of his previous opponents. Minho heard the roar and felt his heart racing. But instead of freezing with terror, he did something unexpected. He smiled. Begin. Krathtok charged immediately, covering the distance between them with frightening speed. His forearms spread wide, claws extended, ready to tear his small opponent apart in the first few seconds of combat. This was how most of his previous battles had ended. Quick, brutal, decisive. But Minho was already moving, instead of standing. His ground, or trying to meet the charge, he turned and ran toward the forest section. The crowd erupted in what the translators labeled as disappointment and mockery. Here was humanity's champion. Running away at the first sign of danger, Krathtok pursued with confidence, expecting to corner his prey among the trees within moments. But when he crashed into the forest, Minho had vanished. The alien champion stopped, listening carefully. He could hear movement in the branches above, the sound of feet running through undergrowth. But he couldn't pinpoint his opponent's location. For 5 minutes, Krathtok searched through the forest while Minho stayed just out of reach. The human moved through the trees like he had been born there, using branches to swing from one area to another. Dropping to the ground only to disappear again before his pursuer could react, the alien crowd grew restless. This wasn't the quick, glorious victory they had expected. Some began making sounds of frustration while others watched with growing curiosity. What was the human doing? Minho was learning. Every time Krathtok moved, the human observed from hiding. He watched how the alien champions for arms coordinated. He noticed that the creature's great strength made him careless, breaking branches and making noise as he searched. He saw that Krathok's confidence was making him sloppy. After 10 minutes of pursuit, Krathtok grew angry, began destroying trees, using his claws to tear through wood like paper. If he couldn't catch the human, he would eliminate all the hiding places. That was when Minho made his first real move. As Krathtok focused on destroying a large tree, the human dropped from the branches above and landed on the alien's back. Before the champion could react, Minho grabbed onto the creature's head and drove, his thumbs toward what he hoped were pressure points near the base of the skull. Krathtok roared in surprise and pain, reaching back with 2 of his arms to grab his attacker. But Minho was already gone, rolling away and sprinting toward the rocky terrain before the alien could turn around. The crowd's mood began to shift. The human had actually hurt their champion, even if only briefly. Some spectators leaned forward in their seats, suddenly more interested in what they were seeing. In the rocky section, the battle changed again. Krathtok could move faster on the open ground, but the terrain was more dangerous. As he chased Minho up a steep slope, the human suddenly disappeared behind a large boulder. When Krathtok rounded the rock, found Minho waiting with a handful of sand and gravel, the human threw the debris directly at the alien's eyes and then dove between his legs, rolling down the slope before the blinded champion could grab him. It was a simple trick, something a child might try in a playground fight. But it worked. Krathtok stumbled, his vision clouded, giving Minho precious seconds to escape. For the next 20 minutes, the pattern continued. Minho would appear just long enough to annoy or confuse his opponent, then vanish before Krathtok could bring his superior strength to bear. He used the water section to create muddy traps that slowed the alien's movement. He used the desert area to kick sand into the air, reducing visibility. He turned every feature of the arena into a tool. The Galactic audience was no longer laughing. They were watching something they had never seen before, not because Minho was particularly skilled or strong, but because he refused to fight the way they expected. Instead of trying to match Krathok's power, he was fighting an entirely different kind of battle. By the 30-minute mark, something unprecedented was happening. Krathtok was breathing heavily. The great champion, who had never been forced to use all 4 arms in combat, was actually getting tired. His charges became less precise, his movements less coordinated. Minho was tired too. His simple gray uniform was torn and dirty. Scratches covered his arms and face from thorns and rocks. But he was still moving, still thinking, still finding new ways to avoid his opponent's attacks. That was when Krathtok made his first real mistake. Frustrated beyond reason, he charged blindly toward the water section where Minho had taken refuge. The alien champion was so focused on finally catching his elusive opponent that he didn't notice the muddy ground near the pool's edge. His feet slipped. For just a moment, the great warrior was off balance. Minho saw his chance. Instead of running away again, he moved forward. Not to attack with strength he didn't possess, but to push at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right direction. Krathtok crashed into the shallow end of the pool with a splash that sent water spraying across the arena. The impact wasn't enough to seriously hurt him, but it was enough to surprise him. For the first time in 47 years of trial combat, the champion found himself flat on his back. Looking up at his opponent, Minho stood at the edge of the pool, breathing hard but still on his feet. He extended his hand toward the fallen champion, not in attack, but in an offer to help him up. The arena fell completely silent. 40 billion viewers across the galaxy watched in stunned disbelief as humanity's representative offered assistance to the warrior who was trying to kill him. Krathtok stared at the extended hand for a long moment. Then, with a roar of rage, he swept his arms through the water and launched himself at Minho with renewed fury. The real battle was just beginning. Krathok's fury transformed him into something even more terrifying than before. Water dripped from his armored skin as he rose from the pool, all 4 arms spread wide like the wings of some prehistoric monster. His black eyes burned with rage. At being knocked down by such a small, weak creature, no one had ever dared to offer him help. Insult was unbearable. Minho barely had time to step back before the alien champion was on him. This time Krathtok wasn't just trying to end the fight quickly. He wanted to hurt the human, to make him pay for the humiliation of being knocked down in front of the entire galaxy. The first blow caught Minho across the chest and sent him flying backward into the rocky terrain. He hit a boulder hard enough to crack the stone, and pain exploded through his ribs. At least 2 were broken, maybe more. He rolled aside just as Krathok's claws carved deep grooves in the rock where his head had been. The crowd leaned forward in their seats. This was what they had expected from the beginning. The small human was finally facing the champion's full strength, and there was no way he could survive. But Minho was already moving again. Hurt, yes. Slower than before, definitely. But still thinking, still adapting. It's Krathok's second strike. Came down, the human twisted away, and grabbed a handful of the loose stone chips created by the alien's claws. He threw them at Krathok's face, not expecting to cause real damage, but hoping to buy himself a few seconds. Those few seconds were enough. Minho scrambled up the rocky slope, using his smaller size to navigate spaces that Kraftok couldn't easily follow. Behind him, he could hear the alien champion destroying rocks in his path. But the delay gave the human time to think. His chest burned with every breath. His left arm wasn't working properly after hitting the boulder, but his mind was still clear, still analyzing what he had learned during their fight. Kraftok was incredibly strong, but that strength made him predictable. When angry, the alien attacked in straight lines. His forearms were powerful, but they sometimes got in each other's way when he moved too quickly. And most importantly, the champion had one crucial weakness that Minho was only beginning to understand. Kraftok had never fought anyone who refused to quit. The alien emerged from the rocky terrain and spotted Minho near the edge of the desert section. This time he didn't charge blindly. He had learned from his earlier mistakes and approached more carefully. Using two arms to guard, while the other two prepared to strike, Minho waited until the last possible moment, then dove to the side and rolled into the sand. Kraftok's claws missed him by inches, but the alien was ready for evasive action now. He spun quickly and caught Minho with a backhand blow that sent the human tumbling across the dunes. This time, Minho didn't get up immediately. He lay in the sand, gasping for air, tasting blood in his mouth. Something was wrong with his shoulder now, too. The crowd grew quiet, thinking the fight was finally ending. Kraftok approached slowly, savoring his victory. It had been merciful. Enough. The little human had provided more entertainment than most opponents. But it was time to finish this charade and show the galaxy what happened to species that challenged the Council's authority. But as the alien champion raised his arms for the killing blow, Minho did something that stunned everyone watching. He looked up at the cameras floating overhead and laughed. It wasn't the laugh of someone who had lost his mind from pain and fear. It was genuine amusement, as if he had just heard a particularly good joke. Blood ran from the corner of his mouth as he grinned at the billions of viewers across the galaxy. "Weird," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the arena's audio systems. "I'm still alive." Kraftok hesitated, confused by the human's reaction. In 47 years of trial combat, no opponent had ever laughed while lying broken and defeated. Fear, yes, anger sometimes, desperate, pleas for mercy, occasionally, but never laughter. Minho used that moment of confusion to roll away from the killing strike and somehow get back to his feet. He swayed unsteadily, clearly hurt badly, but he was standing, still fighting, still refusing to surrender. The alien crowd had fallen completely silent. They were watching something that didn't make sense according to their understanding of combat and survival. The human should have been finished. Any rational being would have admitted defeat by now. Instead, he was laughing and getting ready to continue fighting. Kraftok attacked again, this time with all four arms working together in a coordinated assault that no previous opponent had ever survived. His claws raked across Minho's back, opening deep cuts that bled freely. He grabbed the human's injured arm and twisted it until bones cracked. He lifted Minho off the ground and threw him against the arena wall hard enough to leave a dent. In the metal, any other being would have died from those injuries. Minho hit the wall and slid to the ground, his body broken in multiple places. Blood pooled beneath him. His breathing was shallow and labored, but he opened his eyes. Somehow impossibly, he smiled. "Still here," he whispered loud enough for the cameras to pick up. This time when he tried to stand, his legs wouldn't support him properly. He fell to one knee, then forced himself back up, using the wall for support. His left arm hung useless at his side. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. By any reasonable measure, he was finished. Except he wasn't finished. He took a step forward, then another. Each movement was agony, but he kept moving toward Kraftok with the slow, inevitable persistence of a tide. The alien champion stared. In disbelief, he had inflicted injuries that would have killed most beings instantly. He had broken bones, torn muscles, caused massive blood loss. Yet the human was still coming toward him, still refusing to quit. For the first time in his long Career Krathtok felt something he had never experienced before. Not fear exactly, but a deep unease at witnessing something that shouldn't be possible. This wasn't normal behavior. This wasn't how intelligent beings were supposed to act when faced with certain death. "What are you?" Krathtok asked, his voice carrying a note of genuine confusion. Minho wiped blood from his mouth with his good hand and looked up at the towering alien warrior. When he spoke, his words were broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. "I'm human," he said simply. "We don't know how to quit." Then, despite his broken ribs and damaged arm and bleeding wounds, Minho Kim took another step forward, and another, moving toward an opponent who had already proven he could destroy him, but who apparently couldn't make him surrender. In viewing stations across 47 different star systems, billions of beings watched in fascination and growing alarm as they witnessed something completely outside their experience. They were seeing what happened when you fought someone who simply refused to acknowledge that fighting was impossible. They were seeing what made humans different from every other species in the galaxy, and many of them for the first time began to understand why the Council might have reason to be afraid. What happened next would be debated in alien universities for generations to come. Krathtok, the undefeated champion who had killed representatives from 12 species, found himself backing away from a broken human who could barely stand. It wasn't fear that made him retreat. The alien warrior had never known fear in 4 decades of combat. It was something deeper, more primitive. Every instinct he possessed told him that he was facing something fundamentally wrong, something that violated the basic rules of survival that governed all intelligent life. Minho continued his slow advance, leaving a trail of blood on the arena floor. His injuries should have killed him twice over, but he kept moving forward with mechanical determination. Each step took enormous effort, but he never stopped, never hesitated, never showed any sign of giving up. "Stay back," Krathtok said, raising all 4 arms defensively. "You are already defeated." "Accept it." "No," Minho replied simply. The word came out as barely a whisper, but the arena's audio systems carried it to every corner of the galaxy. Not finished yet. The alien champion attacked again, this time with desperation rather than confidence. He struck Minho with enough force to shatter stone, sending the human crashing into the sand dunes. Surely this time it would end. Surely no being could survive that level of damage. But Minho pushed himself up from the sand once more. His face was a mask of blood and pain, but his eyes remained focused on his opponent. He took another step forward. In the viewing galleries, some alien spectators began making sounds of distress. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was something horrifying, something that challenged their understanding of how life was supposed to work. Several species representatives called for the combat to be stopped, declaring it too disturbing to continue. But the rules were clear. The fight continued until one participant could no longer continue. And despite everything, Minho was still continuing. Krathtok struck him down again and again, each time with increasing desperation, each blow more powerful than the last. But every time the human got back up, not quickly, not easily, but inevitably, like a force of nature that couldn't be reasoned with or stopped by the hour. Mark, something unprecedented was happening. Krathtok, the great champion, was exhausted. His breathing was labored, his movements slower. He had expended more energy in this single fight than in all his previous combats combined, not because his opponent was strong, because his opponent refused to stay down. Min-Ho, meanwhile, could barely see through the blood in his eyes. His body was a collection of broken parts held together by will alone, but he was still standing, still moving forward, still refusing to quit. That was when Krathtok made a sound that his species had never made in combat before. It was translated by the universal systems as a word that meant surrender. The arena fell silent. 40 billion viewers across the galaxy stared in disbelief at their screens. The undefeated champion, the warrior who had never even been seriously challenged, was giving up, not because he was hurt, not because he was outfought, but because he had finally encountered something that his mind couldn't process. An opponent who simply would not stop, no matter what was done to him. Minho heard the word, but didn't understand what it meant at first. He kept walking forward until Krathtok actually stepped aside, clearing the path between the human and the arena exit. "I yield," the alien champion said more clearly. "The combat is yours, human." Minho stopped walking and looked around in confusion. The cameras continued to float nearby, recording everything. The alien audience sat in stunned silence. It took him several moments to realize what had happened. He had won. Not by defeating his opponent, but by being something his opponent couldn't understand or overcome. Had won by being human. Instead of celebrating, Minho did something that surprised the galaxy one final time. He turned back toward Krathtok, who was standing with all four arms hanging at his sides in a gesture of defeat. "Are you hurt?" Minho asked, his voice thick with concern. The question was so unexpected that Krathtok didn't answer immediately. No victor had ever asked about his well-being before. "I am uninjured," the alien finally replied. Minho nodded, then took a step toward him. Krathtok tensed, expecting some kind of attack or humiliation. Instead, the human extended his one working hand. "Good fight," Minho said. "Thank you for the honor." For the second time in the combat, Minho offered his hand to help the alien. "Warrior." This time, after a long moment of hesitation, Krathtok reached out with one of his forearms and grasped the human's hand gently. The image of the broken human shaking hands with the towering alien champion was broadcast to every corner of galactic civilization. It became the most viewed recording in galactic history, not because of the violence, but because of the mercy shown at its end. 3 days later, Ambassador Hyun-Woo Park stood once again before the Galactic Council. This time, the atmosphere in the chamber was very different. The delegates whispered among themselves in dozens of languages, their expressions ranging from awe to confusion to something that might have been fear. "The trial by combat has been completed," High Counselor Vitarin announced. "By the ancient laws, humanity has earned the right to membership in the Galactic Council." There was no celebration, no cheering. The victory felt too strange, too unsettling for the normal ceremonies. "However," Vitarin continued, "your species has also revealed qualities that many council members find ... disturbing. Your representative showed a capacity for endurance that defies biological logic. He demonstrated an inability to recognize defeat that borders on the irrational." Ambassador Park stood straight despite his concerns. "High Counselor, humanity is grateful for this opportunity. I hope to prove worthy of the trust you place in us. The question, Ambassador, is not whether you are worthy. The question is whether the galaxy is ready for you." Over the following months, humanity's integration into galactic civilization proceeded slowly. Some species welcomed them as valuable allies, impressed by their determination and resilience. Others maintained careful distance, unsure how to interact with beings who seemed to operate by different rules than the rest of the galaxy. Minho Kim recovered from his injuries, though he carried scars that would last the rest of his life. He was promoted to the rank of lieutenant and assigned as humanity's first military liaison to the Galactic Council. His job was to help other species understand human behavior and to help humans understand their new neighbors among the stars. But the most important change was in how the galaxy viewed humanity. They were no longer seen as just another violent species seeking membership. They were seen as something unique and perhaps unprecedented, a species that simply didn't know how to quit. In bars and meeting halls across 47 star systems, beings would gather to watch recordings of the combat. They would study Minho's refusal to surrender, trying to understand the mindset that could keep fighting when fighting seemed impossible. Some found it inspiring. Others found it terrifying. But all of them recognized that they had witnessed something that changed their understanding of what intelligent life could be. And on a small transport ship, traveling between Earth and the Galactic Council stations, Minho Kim would sometimes look out at the stars and remember his family on Ceres. They had died trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed, working until the very end because the work needed to be done. He smiled when he thought about them, knowing they would have understood why he volunteered. Humans didn't quit because quitting meant letting other people down. And sometimes, when the stakes were high enough, not quitting was the most important thing you could do, even if it scared the rest of the galaxy.